Namaskar. Welcome to this webinar. This is Dada Rainjitananda. Today we are starting a course on Astaunga Yoga. And Astaunga Yoga is also called the 8 steps of yoga or the 8 limbs of yoga. And I gave here the name Eightfold Yoga. Last week I gave a presentation on the whole system of Astaunga Yoga. And if you haven't watched that presentation, it's good because it gives you kind of an outline of the whole system and what we are going to do during the course. So a little bit about the course. This course has 9 classes. It will go through the month of February and March. Each class is about 45 to 60 minutes. And I will gradually cover all the 8 steps of this system of Astaunga Yoga. You can participate by asking your questions. How to do that? You will see there in the control panel of the webinar that there is a window for questions. So you type your questions. You can type them during the presentation or at the end of the presentation. Sometimes I answer them during the presentation itself. Sometimes I keep them for the end. So you can, anytime a question comes in your mind, you can type it, and but I may answer immediately or later on. I think that's all about the course. And the other thing is that everything is recorded, so you can again watch it later. And those who missed the live presentation can watch the presentation later on. All right. So last presentation, the introduction to the course, I talk about the 5 W's. Means who. Who is going to practice this system of yoga? It is us, human beings. So it is for the human being. It doesn't matter the race, the age, the place where you live, the social status, and doesn't matter. It's for the human being. Now what we are going to practice is yoga. Astaunga Yoga, this is a system of yoga. Yoga is a practice or a science for the development of the human being with the goal that we can attain self-realization. It means self-knowledge, to know about us and our relationship with the universe, and not only to know it, but to kind of realize it within our mind. So why are we practicing yoga? Why should we do that? Well, if we see the human being, we want a good life, a meaningful life, and everything that we do is basically towards that. Of course, sometimes we are forced to do things that are not really taking us in that direction, but if it's up to us, we will only do things that can provide us a meaningful and a good life. Now, where to practice? Anywhere. At your home, if you are traveling, wherever you go, you should practice. You don't need to go to a gym, to a special yoga center. You don't need that. You can practice where you are. And when? That's a very important question. We have to be able to introduce the practices in our daily life, because our mind and body follows a certain cycle, and it's like one day. In one day is we go through a cycle. So in that day we eat, we sleep, and we take care, we have many thoughts. So we have to be able to put the practice in that daily cycle gradually. We don't have to put everything at once. Gradually, as we learn, we try to add it to our daily schedule so that it becomes something that we do every day. I like to say that the things that we do every day, day after day, year after year, those are the things that really matter, because they build our body and they build our mind. So when to practice? In our daily life. Now, how to practice? We are going to now have this course on how to practice it. So I will make an effort to make the course practical. Means you will learn different things that you can implement in your daily life. That is my effort. Now, from you, the effort that I expect is that whatever you learn, even if it's just a little, put into practice in your daily life. So from my side, I make the effort to give you some practical points. From your side, you implement those practical points in your daily life. Now, by implementing them, by doing, you will get some experience. You will also experience some, let's say, benefit or some change within you. The thing is that at present, in today's world, everybody wants immediate change. But change in the mind and change in the body does not happen immediately. That does not happen instantly. It takes time. The body takes time to adjust. The mind takes time to adjust. If I go to the gym and I start doing exercises, on the first day or first week, it will not make a big difference. My muscles will not be bigger, but I may even get tired and pain. So it means I may even think that I'm getting worse, but actually I'm, in the long run, by doing those exercises, my body is improving. I'm becoming more fit. So that is development. In the same way, we'll be doing something for the body here, but we'll be doing a lot for the mind. The mind also changes very slowly. So we have to have that patience, perseverance to keep on practicing. Now, last course, I introduced all the points. Now I will introduce them very gradually throughout the whole course, okay? So we want to have a good life. We want to have a meaningful life. What is the first thing to do? According to this system of Astaunga Yoga, the first thing to do is we need to have a good relationship with others. And for that, there is another system, let's say. There are 5 practices. So within the Astaunga Yoga, which there are 8 points, the first point is divided into 5. And these are 5 practices of Yama. I will be introducing terms in another language, which is Sanskrit. You don't really have to, let's say, memorize them or for now, but I want to introduce them. You keep a note of these terms, because as we develop into the study of yoga, it will be useful to know them. But for now, you don't really have to memorize them. You can still keep on using the English words for the different practices. So let's say that Yama is basically points of self-control in our relation with others. Okay, and there are 5. Now, why we need this good relationship with others? That will help us to maintain mental balance, mental equilibrium. If there is conflict, disharmony, imbalance, our energy gets drained. Means we lose our energy. And so we need this mental equilibrium, and we have to start getting it from the first level of the mind, which is the conscious level. So this practice of Yama, we will practice consciously, means in our conscious level. The conscious level is that one that is related to the sensory and motor organs, means I see something, I hear, I touch, and then I use my hands, use my feet. So that's the conscious level of the mind. It's in contact with this external world. So I need to practice Yama in this conscious level. It means it will work on making my conscious level more balanced. So giving me this mental equilibrium. Here, I'm talking about harmony with other beings. So to practice this first step of Astaunga Yoga, you need at least you and another being. So there should be you and an external entity. So 2 entities minimum. And the practice is how you relate to the other being. So we relate to other people, to other beings, because it may not only be people, through our thought. Means we enter in contact first with our thought, then also with our words, and also with our actions. So we have to observe, control the use of the thoughts, of the words, of the action, to maintain this good relationship with others. Okay? So in this system of Yama, which are these 5 principles, but I prefer to use the word 5 practices, because principles, maybe you have them, but practices, you are doing it. So I like to use the word practices. Now, what is the advantage here? Or what is the need of it? To have a good relationship with others, there are, let's say, thousands of ways that you can do it. All right. And if you go to a bookstore and you ask for a book that will give you ways to have a good relationship with others, they may show you a whole wall full of books. So there's so much. Somebody will say this is the most important point. Somebody will say that's the most important point. And somebody else will say another point. So we may get lost in how much we have to do to keep a good relationship with others. Now, the thing of yoga is that it is, that's my opinion, it is based on the principle of the minimum necessary. So a good practice of yoga will be, what is the minimum necessary that you have to do, the minimum you have to do to attain a certain result. So what's the result we are looking for? We are looking for a good relationship with others. So what's the minimum that I need to do to keep this good relationship with others? Now, Astaunga Yoga gives the answer. There are 5 things you need to do. Okay, so now it has reduced those thousands of things to 5. So there are 5 things. If you do these 5 things, the result should be that you have a good relationship with others. So if you don't have a good relationship with others, then you look at these 5 things and you say, am I missing something here? Am I not doing something? So you have a framework to use so that you keep a good relationship with others. So now let's see, what's the first one? The first one is non-harming. You should not harm other people. If you harm other people, eventually you will not have a good relationship with them. Even an animal, you hit an animal, probably you will have a bad relationship with that animal. And human beings, you hit a human being, you will probably have a bad relationship with that human being. But hurting or inflicting pain doesn't happen only by action. So here it says that this non-harming is not to inflict pain or hurt anybody by thought, by word, by action. In today's world, we are becoming more mental. So sometimes with our thought and word, we cause more harm than physically. So we have to be careful that we are implementing this also starting from the thought, then our words and our actions. So this number 1 principle practice of non-harming in Sanskrit is called ahimsa. And if you do a search in the internet or if you read books about ahimsa, a little bit, you find out a little bit the history of it. The first thing is that it is not something new. It's not something from this century. It's something very, very old. So if it's something very, very old, let's say from thousands of years ago, and if it's been practiced up to now, we would think that it should be known to everybody. And if people are practicing it, then it should have lots of results. But what happens here is that, yes, it is something ancient, something classic, old, and it can be found in the Veda, which is like thousands of years ago. And the Vedas will say that that's the highest virtue to practice ahimsa, or means not to harm anybody. And then great, let's say, philosophers or saints like Mahavir, Buddha, and recently Gandhi, they all have talked about this ahimsa. And in Hinduism, they talk about ahimsa. So many people are talking about it, and they are saying this is the way to do it, and that's the way to do it. And still, there is, how to say, dispute what's the right way, what this is wrong, this is right, this is how you do it. And some people don't think about it at all. So interpretation is very important, but the main thing is practice. Okay, how you practice it. We have to be practical. So now there are some basic questions. One is, okay, I'm not going to harm anybody. Suppose somebody is coming to harm me. What should I do? Should I defend myself? If I defend myself, I can harm that other person. Well, if we see it from a practical point of view, we should think that, yes, I should defend myself. So now there are interpretations. People say, no, you shouldn't do anything. You just, if somebody wants to hit you, you just accept it. So interpretation is important, has to be practical, has to be possible to be applied. And let's say that naturally, if somebody is attacking you, you will defend yourself. If one animal is attacking the other one, the other animal will defend itself. So it's a natural thing to defend ourselves. If in that process the other person gets hurt or the other being, that was not our intention. So one of the main things here is the intention. We shouldn't have the intention to harm. If we have the intention to harm, already it's not non-harming. You're already thinking of harming. So the intention is very important. The other thing is that it is related to us and our relationship with other beings. Now what happens is that being practical, you know, sometimes I tell people I'm vegetarian. They say, oh, so you don't eat any animals? I said, no, I eat vegetables, and that's why I explain. And amongst the reasons, that's not the only reason, amongst the reasons is that, okay, I don't want to harm the animals. So people say, oh, you don't want to harm the animals, but you are harming the vegetables. The vegetable is also a living being. It is true. It is true that for food, every being is using another being for food. So we are human beings. Maybe we are not eating animals, but we are eating vegetables. That's also another being. So it means we are also killing that vegetable to eat. So you may question it. Now, what is the choice here? We have to consider a certain evolutionary scale. Let's consider that human being is the most evolved being. And let's say that after human beings, maybe there are monkeys and dogs, and maybe, let's say, we are jumping, no, but let's say there are cows, and then there are chicken, and then fish, and then there are vegetables, and even in the vegetable category, there may be different classifications, okay? So there is a kind of an evolutionary scale. So I can make the effort to use the less evolved being as my food. So it means that if, let's say, if there are cows, for example, I will not eat the monkeys because monkeys are more developed. Now, if there are chickens, so I don't need to eat the cow because the cow is more developed than a chicken. And if there are fish, maybe I don't need to eat the chicken because I can eat the fish, which is less developed. And if there are vegetables, I may not need to eat the fish because I can eat the vegetables. So in that is my choice. So I can say, do I need to eat this being for my maintenance? Can I find a less developed being? You know, so suppose you are in a situation there is no food at all. There are only monkeys there, nothing else. So you say, okay, to survive, I'm a human being, more evolved than a monkey. So to survive, I may eat that monkey. Now imagine a situation where there are no animals, only human beings. Can you justify now, okay, there are only human beings to eat, so I, as a human being, will eat that other human being? So maybe there one has reached the top limit. you know, because we can think, okay, if one human being has to die, then maybe better I die, or so the situation becomes critical. You know? But wherever we are now, and there is a choice to eat a less developed being, so we should choose in that way, so we can implement better this principle of non-harming, which is the first principle or the first practice to have a good relationship with other beings. So how to have a good relationship with other beings is start by not harming them. And that comes with the intention, okay? You are not harming them. You don't have the intention to harm them. You don't harm them with your words. You don't harm them with your actions. So that would be the first practice to maintain or to develop a good relationship with others. So a little bit here for how to practice it. No, that's the theory. Now, how should I practice it? Every practice will start in the mind. So it starts with the thought. My thought, or I have to develop the thought not to harm any other being. If I get established in that thought, it will translate into expression, outer expression, and action. So for that, let's exercise. Or exercise will bring that into our being. So what the exercise is this week? Okay, so we have 1 week until the next class. So this week, make the effort to practice this non-harming consciously. So when are you going to practice? Whenever you relate to a second entity. Okay, suppose you wake up in the morning. Now you have maybe your wife, your husband, your kids, and you are going to relate with them. So you already prepare your mind that whatever you say, whatever you do, all your actions, and from your thought, you don't want to harm them in any way. Okay, that may be easy with our family, if we are in good terms with our family. But imagine you have conflicts with your husband or with your wife. Usually you are thinking how to hit the other one, and the other one is thinking how to hit you. So now you start practicing this non-harming. So the first thing you have to do is your intention should change. You don't want to give a hit to that one. You want to do actions, think, and use your words that you don't cause any harm. That may already create a change in your relationship. Or you, in your job, you have a bad relationship with somebody, so everything they say you want to kind of give a reply that will be pinching. No. So now you are practicing non-harming. Change that. Okay. So during this week, that is the effort. So do it as an exercise. When every time you have to relate with a second entity, second being, second human being, even animal, any entity externally, at that moment is the opportunity you have to practice this non-harming. Okay, so that is for the first, let's say the first practice for the first point of the Astaunga Yoga, or the 8 steps, 8 points for the systematic practice of yoga. Okay, so we are making progress. That was number one. Remember, we are still on that point, a good relationship with others. So that part is divided into 5. So we covered the first one. Today I want to cover also the second one, but you already have an exercise for the week. Second point, you want to keep a good relationship with others. Why? Because if the more conflict you bring in your life, the more imbalance you bring to your mind. Your conscious mind is not in balance. Who is suffering? In the end, you are suffering. Okay, so we want a good life. We want a meaningful life. We want a life that takes us towards yoga. So that's why we are practicing yoga. So that's the idea. We need this good relationship with others. We saw the first point. Let's see the second point. When we are relating to others, many times we are using words. So we are saying things. So we are saying something to another human, in this case. So whatever words we are using is the means of relationship between us. So I have a question for you. What is the best use of words? So I phrased the question in this way. Do you think that telling the truth is the best use of words? Means that's the best thing you can do, best thing you can say, to tell the truth. Is it a yes? Is it a no? Or is it sometimes? Can you just click on the answer that it matters most to you? Okay, I give you a few more moments. Just with your mouse, you can click there. If you're using a tablet, also you can touch it. And all right, okay. So let me close this. Thank you for your answers. There was some yes, and there was some sometimes. Okay, so let's analyze it. Many times, if I tell the truth, it's good. It's straight, clear, and it brings a good result. But sometimes, if I just say plainly the truth, this is what happened, it may be more harmful than good. Means I did tell the truth, so I can say I'm not to blame, but by telling that truth, I created a big problem. Okay, then what's the solution? Should I have lied? Well, not really. We have to go a little bit beyond the truth. And it's a difficult practice. We have to add one ingredient, and that ingredient is benevolence. It means we should have intention to bring a good result, to bring benefit. It means we should have benevolence. Let's say we have a truth. It's one container here that is truth. Then I have another container here that is benevolence. So now I mix them, and I get a third thing, which let's say in English I will call benevolent truth. In Sanskrit it's called satya. Okay, so I as I mentioned before, I'm giving you the word in Sanskrit and also the word in English. So English, benevolent truth. So not only truth, benevolent truth. Sanskrit, satya. So there is, it's not always the same. It's not straightforward in the sense that truth is simple. I can say this is what happened, this is the truth. But if I want to say the truth in a way that brings welfare, that is benevolent, I really have to use much of my mind. I have to think a lot, and I have to think deeply. I have to be able to, let's say, think of the welfare of others first, and not only, let's say, telling the plain truth. So there is some difficulty in there. There is some relativity, because in different situations I may have to act in a different way. So this point, this satya, or this benevolent truth, is not so easy as just telling the truth. And it can be sometimes, let's say, sometimes it can be tricky, because I may be in doubt what should I really do, you know. But let me give you some hints or some tips of how to start the practice. And I want to remind also that when we start some practice, in the beginning, we may fail sometimes, we may not be very successful, but in the long run, as we practice, we get better and better. And that is for physical practices and also mental practices. So in this case, it's a mental practice. I'm going to say some words to somebody else, all right? And I have to think that these words that I'm saying, they have a lot of energy. They can create a change in the mind of this other individual. They can make that individual down, happy, angry. It means I can make them do things that they shouldn't do. And so I may create a lot of harm to that individual just with my words. Okay, so I should be conscious of that. And then I want to say these words that it brings some benevolence, or satya in Sanskrit. I'm going to relate a story. Okay. This story is that a personal experience. I was giving a class when I was living in New York City. And every week I will teach one of the points of Yama. So that week was the point of Satya, benevolent truth. So I gave the class, and then I told everybody this week, practice this as I'm telling to you. No, it's another exercise for this week. Practice the first point and practice the second point also. So practice Satya, practice this benevolent truth. How do you practice? Yes, difficult, but you start from the point that when you meet somebody and you are going to talk to the person, you can prepare your mind, or even consciously at that moment think that now is my opportunity to practice Satya. Means I'm going to talk. So words are going to be coming from me. And these words should carry benevolence and truth to this other individual. It means by me saying these words, I should bring something good for that individual in one way or another. So in that situation, I had given the class, and usually when you teach something, you have to do it also, and you have to be a living example of it. So I thought that, yes, I do have to also make some particular effort to practice Satya this week more sincerely. So the next day, I was traveling. So I was driving, and I was alone in the car. And it was a very long journey. So I was driving for a few hours, and I thought, wow, I'm alone, so I don't have an opportunity to practice this benevolent truth. And I have told everybody to practice, so I should also practice. When I was thinking that, I was on the expressway, and so I had to stop to pay the toll. And so when I saw there is a person in the cabin and I'm going to pay the toll, so I thought in my mind, mentally, I just came this idea that, oh, now is a moment that I can practice Satya, I can practice benevolent truth. So I stopped the car, opened the window, and I looked at the individual. It was a man, an older man, and he looked at me. I was dressed in orange. I didn't have the turban on. I just dressed in orange. He looked at me, and what did he do? He raised his hands and started singing the mantra Hare Krishna. So he started Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I didn't say, okay, I'm not from the Hare Krishna movement. It didn't matter. I just saw that he was happy, enjoying himself at that moment. So I thought that, wow, just by thinking that, actually, I had just told him something like, good afternoon, you know. So just by saying those words, and maybe with this thought that I should bring something good for that person. So there was a wave, and that was created this feeling of happiness in him that he started dancing. So I thought that, yes, it is really quite powerful, the idea that when you are going to relate to somebody, you think in that moment that you want to say something that is, let's say, elevating, that is benevolent, and that's truthful to that individual. And that's a way of starting the practice of Satya. All right, so this much about this second point. And just to review a little bit what we saw today. And remember, you can type questions, comments, things you want me to emphasize in the questions window. So a summary. We are talking about Astaunga Yoga. Asta means 8. So there are 8 parts, 8 practices in Astaunga Yoga. Number 1, to have a good relationship with others. In Sanskrit is called Yama. That will help directly our conscious mind. In this practice, there are 5 other sub-practices, let's say. In Yama, there are 5 parts. First one, non-harming, also known in Sanskrit as ahimsa. So You don't want to harm any being. You are not going to do anything to harm any being. You are not going to harm by words either. So your intention is not to harm. The second, benevolent truthfulness, or satya, means you are going to relate with words, so your words should be benevolent, should bring welfare. So you see, the first one is something like not harming. The second one is do good, do something good. So you don't want to harm. Second, you want to do good with your words, with your expression towards that other being. So that is satya. So these are 2 of the 5 practices for a good relationship with others. And in the beginning, I also said that why these 5 practices? And my explanation was, and this is what I feel, is that there are so many points for a good relationship with others. My interpretation of yoga, or my feeling towards yoga, is that in yoga, you get the minimum necessary to get some result. So the result here is a good relationship with others. What is the minimum necessary? Because if I go to a library or a bookshop, I can read hundreds of books telling me what is important. So I can get lost. So let's reduce it. Okay, here it's reduced to 5. This is based on an ancient knowledge of yoga, reduced to 5 points to get a good relationship with other beings. The good thing is that you don't have to worry about 10 points, 15 points, 100 points, 1,000 points. You worry about 5. And from these 5, we saw 2 today. So having this system of 5 is good, because if you have a bad relationship with anyone, in your family, in your work, in any relation like this, you have a bad relationship with that person, for example. So you think, okay, I have a bad relationship with that person. What can I do? I have here 5 points. So you put the 5 points in front of you and you think, how can I work on these 5 points in a way that it creates a good relationship with that other person? You may think sometimes, no, but it's not my fault. It's the fault of the other person. And I'm sure the other person will think the same way. He will think it's not my fault, it's your fault. Okay, so we can't think of that, because I cannot change another person. I can change myself. Of course, the other person seeing myself can change, but usually it's that person changes from their inside and I change from my inside. I can for some time force somebody to change, but by force, but when I remove the force, it will continue the same. So usually I can work on my side and then see what happens on the other side. So I have these 5 points. I can work on those 5 points. So this week, you have only 2 points. So practice these 2, see how it goes. If it's like going to the laboratory. Okay, you got these 2 points. Now you are going to the laboratory. That's your life. Your life, there are this many people. Some you have great relationships, some you don't. Now you have 2 points to work during this week. See if by working on these 2 points, anything changes in your relationships. Okay, so that is the summary for today, and that's the presentation for today. Now You can go on typing your questions. And I want to close with a quote. The quote is that all living things love their life. They desire pleasure, and they do not like pain. They dislike any injury to themselves. And everybody is desirous of life, means nobody wants to die. And to every being, his life is very dear. I mean, every being wants to live. No being wants to die. It's not that like an animal wants to die for you. No, you are, let's say, having to do action to kill that animal so that you can eat that animal. So it's, and that is real to all beings. Okay, and this comes from classic yoga shastras. All right. Okay. So now, seeing some questions here. So, first question is a long question. Is saying about Gandhi and non-violence. If it's the same as ahimsa, non-violence, is non-violence the same as ahimsa? Basically, that's the question. I can say that it's related. It's kind of interpretation. If we go by the definition, violence, okay, violence is when I'm using my force. I have to use force. So sometimes I do have to use force. And sometimes it's violent, but it may not be with the intention to harm. So it's not exactly the same. It's a little bit a different interpretation. Okay, so here the interpretation is I'm doing things, the intention is not to harm. I don't have any intention to harm. But if I have to use force or not use force, that's a second point. Okay, so sometimes you may have to use force with the intention not to harm. Means even not to harm, you will need force not to harm. Okay, so violence, non-violence is not exactly the same as non-harming. But I don't want to go into a very deep discussion now because there is also shortage of time. So I want to concentrate on the practice, means you are practicing now to have a good relationship with others. And the first point is not to harm anybody. Okay, so now you see in your life what you can do. Okay, so that's the most important for now. And I don't see any other question at this moment. So if it comes to your mind later, more questions you can ask. And I'm going to end now. We almost an hour. Thank you very much for participating in this webinar. You will get the recording. And namaskar.